When my dad passed away, and my friend Mark says, I want to warn you, your dad is going to reach out to you.
What?
He goes, I guarantee you, your dad is going to reach out to you. I want to get back to this question of faith versus science. It's an inward choice to open up your heart and contemplate the possibility of something bigger.
Dr. B is here to explain how our mental, physical, immunological, and even spiritual health are all intimately connected and connected to the gut.
You could go to 5 different doctors for 5 different health issues. What they're not going to tell you is it's all part of the same story: inflammation. This is our mood, our cognitive health, our metabolic health, difficulty with concentration, headaches, bloating, constipation, acid reflux, acne, eczema, psoriasis.
So everyone wants to know, how do I become less inflamed?
Here's how your brain influences your gut.
What if everything that was wrong with you is actually because of one thing?
70% of our immune system's in the lining of our gut. The gut microbiome is connected to the brain, is connected to the kidneys, is connected to the heart, is connected to the immune system.
We're potentially in the middle of a revolution.
Now I'm going to shine a light on this. I want to create the solutions. As a medical doctor, when you find something that changes your own life, how can you deny that to your patients?
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik.
And I'm Jonathan Cohen.
And welcome to our breakdown.
Today we are merging emotional health, physical health, and spiritual health. This is the culmination of science meets spirituality.
In your gut and your entire body. We're speaking to a celebrated gastroenterologist and gut health expert who has decided to write a book not just about gut health, because he has written a book about gut health, not just about how to live with your gut in mind, because he's already done that too. The book we're going to be talking about covers what it looks like to actually be healthy, not just with what you eat, but with when you eat it, how you eat it, why you eat it, and does it matter how you feel about yourself, the universe, and God in order for you to be able to metabolize correctly?
It's so powerful to hear a medical doctor talk about having a relationship with something greater than ourselves, the nature of the soul, and how that doesn't actually take away from science, that science helps him feel more spiritual and connected.
The person we're talking to is Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. People know him as Dr. B, and he is, as we said, a fantastic gastroenterologist. And his previous books, Fiber Fueled and the Fiber Fueled Cookbook, are fantastic. We've had Dr. B on before, but his new book is called Plant Powered Plus. And it is not just a book about plant-based diets. It is not just a book of recipes. It really is an exploration of how the template that we have creates ultimately not only our gut health, but our mental health, our physical health, our immunological health, and even our spiritual health.
He talks about the gut-brain connection, that 95% of Americans are deficient in something that they could be eating to help fuel their microbiome and help their immune system. He debunks the carnivore diet, the fact that some people think you should only eat sardines. He gives the best description about ketosis that I've ever heard and why it may not be the be-all and end-all of health like so many people say. In addition, he talks about the dangers of GLP-1s, how big pharma is actually influencing doctors to make recommendations that could go against their patient's best interest.
This episode is full of mic drops, and we are so excited to have Dr. B in person. Dr. B, welcome back to The Breakdown. Break it down.
Oh, thank you so much. Great to be back. First time in person.
Thank you so much for being here in person. We really love an in-person conversation, and especially given Plant Powered Plus, it feels like something that really needs to be kind of spoken about in person. So the first thing I wanted to ask about was, you've written other books, you've had success with other books. You obviously are known as, for many of us, the expert, right? On all things gut health, and gut and immune health. But with this book, you did something different and you approached it differently. The easy question is, why did you write this book? The more complicated question is, what did you feel needed to be included in this phase of your career as a clinician?
I see these books as being tools for healing. Like, I sincerely believe that. Like, within each book, for a specific person, you have what you need to be successful in your health. And the first book was like, it's almost like a rock band, and you just like have this organic first album that comes together, right? And so this was the story of the gut microbiome, because I was seeing this in my clinic, completely convinced as a gastroenterologist that these people who are walking through these doors, this is their problem, right? I understand that I make a diagnosis code, irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, acid reflux, whatever. But like to me, the root of the problem is in the gut microbiome. So that was Fiber Fueled. That was my first book. And after that book was so successful, there were so many people that were good people, like wonderful people who read the book, were inspired, and followed the 4-week protocol in the back, and then go, okay, I don't feel well. And so they come to me, like, you know, through social media and whatnot. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know what? I want to create for you the resource that is like literally what I would do if we were working together in the clinic, right? So that's the Fiber Fueled cookbook. That was my second book. If you're going to address food intolerances, which is what we're talking about, these people who like rev up their fiber intake, not feeling so hot, what's going on here? It's a food intolerance. If you're going to do that, you actually need to eat, and you need to be smart and strategic about it. And so kind of the cool thing from my perspective was that like there were protocols built into a cookbook. It's a very atypical thing for a cookbook. So that was 2022. The first book was 2020. The cookbook was 22. Here I am, and I have the opportunity. I'm blessed. I get to write books, and they can change people's lives. That is an opportunity that I take for granted every single moment that I'm working on these projects. And so what should I turn my attention to? To me, there's this one problem that is like far and above the number one health-related challenge of our time. ... One word, inflammation, and ties together. You could go to 5 different doctors for 5 different health issues. They're going to give you all these different diagnoses, but what they're not going to tell you is it's all part of the same story, which is inflammation. It's driving these health conditions. And so, and like, this is not just autoimmune disease, although it is, allergic disease, but there's also so much more. This is our mood. This is our cognitive health. This is both men's and women's hormonal balance, hormonal health. This is our metabolic health, which we know we got a problem with that in America, right? And most importantly, this is our immune health. So, I basically made the decision. I'm going to take this issue, inflammation, which I see as the root of the problem, and I'm going to shine a light on this. I want to show you the story of like what this is all about. And I want to create the solutions, because that's what people are ultimately yearning for. And that becomes the book that ultimately like builds towards the protocol in the back.
You know, there have been so many moments, especially when we talk about gut health and health in general. There have been so many moments where we realized, oh, we should have been paying attention to this. Oh, we should have been paying attention to that. And we've kind of like made our way through it, right? Don't eat processed foods, right? Don't eat ultra processed foods. Too much meat is not good, but like, do we need that? Like, there's all these decisions to make. It seems like when we talk about inflammation, we're potentially in the middle of a revolution in the way that we approach health in general, and not just gut health.
One of the core ideas in this book is that there was a pattern to life as humans, that we basically like lived a certain way with minor variations on that concept for millions of years. And then very quickly, in the last 100 years, we upended all of it, and we call this new pattern of life normal. And it's not. It never was. It's unlike anything that our grandparents experienced. So like I would imagine that your grandparents were probably similar age. My grandparents were born 1918, like around World War I time. And like there were no cars. They were walking or riding their bike to school. They were outdoors every single day. There was no television at that point. Like you had to go to a movie theater, which was a rare event. If you wanted a Coke, you had to save your money up to get that Coke. That was a special thing, right? It did exist, but like you had to save your money to get access to that special thing, right? So there is so much about the way in which they live their lives. Electricity was like a brand new thing, right? And now here we are in 7 hours a day on tablets and devices for the average adult in the United States that like didn't exist in the 1990s. 7 hours a day.
I mean, you could also say, when my grandparents and when our grandparents were young, like people were also dying of routine things that maybe they didn't need to. And they didn't have education at their fingertips, and they didn't have all of the possibility that technology allows. I mean, I'm just sort of like playing devil's advocate here.
I certainly am not arguing that it's like a total regression, right, of life. Like there's clearly been progress on many different levels. But what we're also talking about are diseases of affluence, right? Which is that as we've become richer, we've become actually more disconnected from what our natural biology is designed to do. And so all of those things, access to food is like, it's wonderful that we have greater access to food, and it's wonderful that we have comfortable air-conditioned homes and all these things. But at some point you cross a line where these things are the comforts of our life, the ease of our life has actually created problems.
Well, and Gabor Mate talks about, he literally wrote a book called The Myth of Normal, right? All of these things that we've been told, like, oh, it's normal for most people in the United States to be on 3 medications, right? By the time you're, whatever it is, 45, there's like some astounding statistic. Can you tell us a little bit, in particular, as a clinician, what ails us? What are you seeing that we are bearing the brunt of physically that has changed in the last 100 years?
Let's take this core concept of inflammation and let's just kind of like go down the line and think about some of the symptoms. And, we can all sort of like listen to this list and ask the question, how does it affect me? Right. And just to be clear before we start this, like these can be subtle symptoms that aren't necessarily something that you have gone to your healthcare provider for.
They're things that you just think, oh, that's how my body works.
That's how I am. That's my normal, right? That's my normal. So starting from the top, going all the way down.
This is a fun game.
Yeah, you could have difficulty with concentration, right? Or like be distracted. You could have brain fog. You could have headaches. You could have congestion in your nose. That might be like a more severe thing, like seasonal allergies, but it also could be like, hey, I get congested at night. I can't breathe, right? You could have skin outbreaks.
That's my favorite time to not breathe.
At night? Well, we could talk about this. There's a reason why. Yeah. Skin, like outbreaks, many different skin conditions. So acne, of course, that's common. That's inflammation. Eczema, psoriasis, these are inflammatory skin conditions.
The things that when you go to your standard dermatologist, they're like, put cortisone on it. And you're like, it goes away and I'm fine. And we don't need to talk about it. That's skin.
Well, yeah, cortisone is a steroid. You're basically suppressing the immune system and then magically everything gets better. In terms of our gut, you could have bloating as a classic symptom, constipation, diarrhea. You could have acid reflux. So increased urinary frequency, other urinary symptoms. In men, erectile dysfunction. In women, we have to talk about, fertility and perimenopause and menopause. These things are having a moment right now. And it's not just women having a voice. It's more than that. It's also that these things are becoming a bigger problem.
Well, chronic pain, autoimmune conditions, right? I was also thinking like systemic, like my body doesn't work. The number of women I know who are either having thyroid issues or about to have thyroid issues, combining that with perimenopause and menopause, and then a variety of other autoimmune conditions.
Right, or joints, right? So joints, and it could be like, hey, I just have arthritis, right? It could be body aches, muscle aches. It could be recovery after exercise. It could be the ability to perform exercise.
What if everything that was wrong with you is actually because of one thing?
To be clear, that, I'm not making the claim that the only thing that causes these particular symptoms is inflammation, but it could be.
For an individual person, right? You could be going to 5 different doctors and being like, what's wrong with my stomach? And what's wrong with this? And what's wrong with that? And I need this to suppress this.
The number one symptom of inflammation, like with clarity, is fatigue. It's fatigue. Like basically like you feel exhausted.
Like I don't wake up feeling rested.
Well, insomnia is another one as well.
Right. But even still, like that's a thing that they often ask you on questionnaires. Do you feel rested when I'm like, oh, are you supposed to?
Difficulty losing weight, blood sugar out of control, high blood pressure, blood lipids out of control. These are all inflammatory health conditions. So our mood being affected. We could just keep going forever.
Yeah.
Mayim Bialik's Breakdown is supported by Notion.
Despite my best efforts to make it not so, there's only one of me. Prepping for interviews, post-meeting admin work used to take so much of my workday up. There's only so many hours in a day, only so much focus we can give. Daydreaming about having a teammate who works just like I do with all the context, the same goals I have, but faster is now a reality. With Notion's new AI agent integrated right into your workspace, my agent can do anything I can do in Notion. Tasks that used to take days can now happen literally in minutes. Notion brings all your notes, docs, and projects into one connected space that just works. It's seamless, flexible, powerful, and it's actually fun to use. With AI built right in, you spend less time switching between tools and more time creating great work. And now with Notion Agent, your AI doesn't just help with work, it finishes it. Notion Agent can tap into your Notion workspace, the web, and connected tools like Slack and Google Drive, all the places I spend my time, to complete assigned actions end to end so you can focus on the hard decisions. It's like delegating to another version of you that knows your style, your workflow, your preferences, because it learns from you how you work. With a single prompt, Notion Agent forms a plan, executes it, and will even reassess, try again if it hits a snag, completing multi-step tasks like creating new pages or databases from scratch, or simply editing them or summarizing entire projects in minutes. You assign the tasks, your agent does the work. Notion Agent has enhanced database querying capabilities to find patterns and insights in mere seconds. Everything your agent does is editable and transparent. You can always undo changes. You can trust it with your important work. Notion is used by over 50% of Fortune 500 companies. Some of the fastest growing companies like OpenAI use Notion Agent to help their teams stay ahead. Try Notion now with Notion Agent at notion.com/break. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/break to try your new AI teammate Notion Agent today. When you use our link, you're supporting our show, notion.com/break.
So everyone wants to know, of course, like, how do I become less inflamed? And it seems as though there are many different directions to get there. But what strikes us with your book is that it's one of a growing body, a growing voice amongst, quote unquote, traditional medical practitioners. And I don't mean traditional as in the same. I mean that you've been trained, you operate in a Western medical system, but you're expanding what it means to be healthy. And one of those things that you include is the idea of the emotional components of being well. You talk about a core self. You talk about the soul in your book. Can you describe the mission of this book as it relates to the entire person and what that means to you?
I think that, Jonathan, the healing comes in many forms, right? And ultimately healing for the individual person. So one of the things that I wrote in the very front of the book, which is the author's note, is I said, listen, it's impossible for me to write a different book for every single person. So it's going to be one book. But what I hope is that you will hear it differently and uniquely to you. So for that person who's reading my book, I hope that they come to these moments where there's an aha moment, where they're like, hey, this is the thing that's missing for me. And as I look out across our country, across the globe, honestly, right now, I see a lot of pain and I see a lot of loneliness. And if we could address those issues, that is in fact healing. And we can get into, it's not a woo-woo thing. It's not disconnected from what our physiology is. In fact, like I describe with total clarity, here's the way that it works. Here's how your brain influences your gut, right? So these things, our emotions ultimately are captured by our body and they can be manifested in our health. So it's important for people to understand that.
Can you talk a little bit about some of these emotional patterns that you see? You know, this is something that Gabor Mate talks about in his book, and even Van der Kolk talks about. What are some of the profiles that you see in terms of disease and emotional processing?
One of the things that I discuss is my mentor, who was at the University of North Carolina, Dr. Douglas Strassman, who was a pioneer in the space, and he was very interesting because he merged psychiatry with medicine, right? Medicine meaning like internal medicine, gastroenterology, brought those two things together. And now there's these ideas that are accepted, but like he was the one that made them acceptable because he was publishing the papers in the 90s. about the impact of trauma on the manifestation of irritable bowel syndrome.
Oh, and nobody wanted to hear about that. Meaning nobody wanted to think, oh, what your parents did to you is causing your health problems. Get over it. You're fine. It must be something else. It's the food you're eating.
Well, even the food that you're eating is typically not what a doctor says. I mean, I look, it's the healthcare system. It's hard for doctors, right? A lot of them are burning out because they're not allowed to actually work the way they want to work. But that being said, because of the training and because of the time constraints, it's actually quite common for people to be dismissed and told, like, you're just stressed out, right? Stop stressing out so much. I mean, I've had a bajillion people who have come to me and told me this is what my doctor said. And no, there's a lot more to your story. It's not just that.
A lot of people have heard trauma as it relates to the functioning of their bodies, but like you do an amazing job at talking about the mechanisms, which I think we need to unpack to have it be more understandable and accessible. But there's something even almost more spiritual in this book, which again is something that we both relate to, and I think our audience really relates to. Since we first spoke to you, the podcast has gone into really the intersection of science and spirituality, where there isn't enough data. Like, there's a lot emerging, but there isn't a clarity necessarily to be like, this is causes affect this, and oh, there's an afterlife, and oh, we need to, our soul is guiding us. Yeah, God is real, and we're guiding us in some way. So I want to take a little bit of time to sort of unpack this area, because people, they're collecting protocols like crazy, right? There are a lot of 4-hour podcasts on the internet, and there's note systems, and they're digesting these notes, and AI is creating protocol systems. And people need that, right? They need a protocol system, but you've said you've seen people do everything right and it not work.
I think that actually what we're talking about here, there is no protocol for, right? Because it's actually where you're at and where your focus and intention is in a quiet moment, right? And what's happening with your heart? Like, are you closed off, right? And rejecting the possibility of something greater? Or are you willing to open up your heart? And this is not, by the way, this is not a call to organized religion or a specific religion, right? This is more to say, I mean, there's a conversation there. We could talk about that. That's a separate thing. But this is more so from my perspective. Every single human that has lived on this planet grapples with the same questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? What does it all mean? What is my purpose? And what's going to happen when I'm gone, right? Like, we're grappling as adults with these questions. And what's fascinating to ponder is that every single civilization in human history has come to the same conclusion. There must be something greater. There must be something greater. Well, that's not the rational decision, right? That's not the rational conclusion. The rational conclusion would be, what I see is what exists. There's nothing more, and that's it. Right? So how did we land there? It's so interesting to think about that. And, I think that there's, Jonathan, this natural tension that will always exist between science and faith. And I'm here to say that you will never be able to get, there will always be a requirement for faith, because we're never going to figure it all out. And in a way, the more that we figure out in terms of science, the more that I become, at least for me, convinced it's too perfect. It all makes too much sense. There's no way that this is chance. Science says that our solar system was created with a Big Bang. I mean, you can absolutely accept that, and I wouldn't call you crazy for that.
I feel pretty good about it.
And that would be fine. But you could also have a more biblical view that no, some higher power created this for us, right? And I actually think that among those two theories, you could say they're both crazy, or you could say neither of them are crazy.
Well, they're also not mutually exclusive. Like, for me, my kind of concept is that, whatever power there is created the Big Bang, created the ability for us to facilitate all this thing, and that, the Torah, or, the Old Testament, is not a science book per se, right? It's an explanation of an attempt to make people understand a concept that is so enormous that we will never fully understand it.
To that end, when a child is young, right, their brain is only capable of processing certain things. So when the parent leaves the room, they don't have the ability to understand that their parent is going to, like, in the other room, right? And they're going to come back in 2 seconds.
Right.
They think they just lost their parent. They're freaked out.
Right.
Right?
That's all of our existence as humans.
That's all of our existence. Like, what if there's something more that we as humans are just not capable of processing? But what I come back to and what I described in the book, and this to me was like probably my favorite moment, was the very end of chapter 8. Chapter 8, first of all, is my favorite chapter I've ever written.
It's very special. It's almost its own little book. Like, it's its own little moment.
It's a moment. I had things that I needed to get off my chest.
Yeah. You could have started chapter 1 with that. I would have loved it too.
I think it's a great ending to the book, though, right? Like you come through this whole thing, and yes, we're talking science and nerdiness and all these things, and then you come to this place where, well, no, hold on, let's like get more human.
But fundamentally, like, let's just think about the principles of health for a second. If we started with 8 and said, if everything's going great in your life, don't worry about it. But if it's not, and you're looking at protocols and you're thinking about what to do, let's explore this part of your life. What does it mean to feel a connection to something greater? What does it mean to not feel isolated, even if you haven't managed to get the best social connections that you feel fueled by, meaning you haven't built the perfect family, there's strife, but like, what if we looked at these aspects of our life as the blinking red light to say, look at these areas because they may be influencing you biologically. It's not just this thing that would be nice to have.
Well, and if I can put it, in an even simpler way, why should we care? And what I mean is, why should we care what Dr. B thinks about our spiritual life? I mean, I think that's really the unique aspect of what you created with this book. It's not just why do you care, it's why should we care? I've got so many blood tests to take, and I've got so many doctors, and I have so many this, and I have to do this telehealth, and I got to learn a new portal to do. How on earth could my health improve from understanding chapter 8?
I can walk you through the physiology of what's there, right? Which is that it's really a story of the brain-gut connection. So where our brain is constantly influencing what's happening inside of our gut. And vice versa. It's a two-way connection, constant communication. They're basically best friends. All right. But we are hardwired with this, what we describe as the autonomic nervous system, which is designed to allow us to react to the context of our life and react in ways that, like, you don't have to think it, your body just does it, like it or not, right? So you get cut off, your heart rate goes up, right? You have to go up on stage and give a talk. You can hear your heart pounding, right? So you just got bad news, right? All of these different things are basically activations of this defense system that we developed to protect ourselves called the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is, if I were to describe it in one word, it's adrenaline, right? It's adrenaline. It's basically activation, get up and go, right? So if in theory we were living out in the wilderness,
it's run, it's fight,
you are basically given the energy source that you need in that moment to survive, because you need like a burst of energy to pull through, right? So that's the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the problem is that we live in a world where it's on sympathetic overdrive. So basically we wake up, we're getting hit with, like, we flip open our phone, we're on Twitter or whatever it may be, and we're already getting hit with sympathetic stimulation, right? Because we're upset, or we're seeing things that are triggering us or making us mad. We're getting activated, right? And then you go to your job, and like basically you're getting activated at your job because you got that frenemy who's trying to undermine you even though they're smiling to your face.
Or you're unhappy at your job because it's actually not speaking to what your soul needs.
100%, right? Which is a big part of what chapter 8 is about.
Right.
It's like the need for connections and purpose. You go through the course of your day, and there's like all these moments where like we're being asked to run fast on this hamster wheel. Basically, like we're asked to go super hard. I'll speak for myself. I wake up, I'm going from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed. And the only way to disrupt that is to be intentional and to actually flip to the opposite side, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, which basically is rest and digest. So when we flip over to the parasympathetic nervous system, and there's a number of ways that we can do this.
If sympathetic is adrenaline, this is like the nobody's chasing you, you
Safety.
have time. How do you feel safe?
You feel safe. Like safe would be the word for parasympathetic, right? So that you can get nice and comfortable. And within that context,
Deep breaths.
breathing, so diaphragmatic breathing is a classic way that you can basically teach your body to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. But then there's all these other things that we think of, like there's like spa-like stuff, right? Where you go and you get a massage or you get acupuncture.
But that's stressful for a lot of us. You got to talk to people, go places, be seen. That can be an adrenaline fueled situation, right? You're like, I'm going to go have all the self-care and it's going to be amazing. But you have trauma and actually don't like to be touched, right? By a stranger. So all these things. So you're not just talking about that kind of resting.
Or it's expensive and you're like, oh my God,
We're not talking about vacation resting. We're talking about like internal rest.
But these things can potentially put you into a
Totally.
parasympathetic state, or
Yes.
like a sauna, right? You get into a
Right.
sauna, you get nice and relaxed, right? But there's also these other elements that are like more about manifestations of human connection to other people, right? So like holding hands, hugging, kissing, right? Like expressing how you feel about a person. Like actually these things will activate your parasympathetic nervous system,
Connection.
human connection. And then there's the spiritual elements where like basically it's been shown that prayer or reading from whatever scripture you prefer or singing hymns, right? Or like actually going to a church service, right? A religious service, that these different expressions of your spirituality actually can activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So, and here's where we are in terms of the data. Basically, like we just talked about human connection. Okay. Over 50% prior to the pandemic, over 50% of Americans reported feeling lonely.
That's a lot of Americans before the pandemic.
Before the pandemic. So it stands to reason that it got worse. Loneliness is not to be brushed off or dismissed because it's been shown that the sentiment of feeling lonely is on par with smoking 15 cigarettes per day. So like in terms of the impact on your health and your mortality, that's what we're talking about.
What's the mechanism?
We are such social creatures and we can't shake that.
Even the introverts, even the ones that are like, I get stressed around, I just want to be left alone in my house.
They still would love to feel safe at home with other people that they care, right? They may not want to go out in public.
Everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants to feel they have their people, their person,
Right.
their moment, their
Yes.
place.
Think about where we came from, right? Which was that like basically, right? We came from tribes and the tribe, the essential unit of a tribe was your family. And then the broader tribe was essentially like a conglomerate of several families, right? It was like a family of families, right? That's where we came from. And within that context, survival was the most important thing. There was no house, there was no money. So the measure of wealth for the vast majority of human history was actually the size of your family and how connected you were to other people. Because if you had that, you were more likely to survive.
Resources, support, things like that.
All of the things, right? Your tribe comes under attack, you can support one another. You get sick, you have people to take care of you, right? They don't just leave you behind. So, right, so this is where we come from. Okay, so then like apply this idea to the modern world. And if you were to isolate a person, it's like basically you're inflicting emotional harm on them. Like I would argue that like to ostracize a person is emotional abuse.
But all of society has been set up to isolate people more and more.
Does that make it right?
Absolutely, but it's like an alarm bell that should be going off. Everyone should be living in their little apartments, separated from one another with no common space. Like the Parks Department used to spend 3% of GDP. Now they spend like 0.2% on GDP on public spaces in large cities.
This is one of the ideas that I discuss in the book is that we've embraced two concepts that I actually think are a mistake, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm guilty. So I'm not casting stones here. I'm just saying like culturally, we've slipped up. And those two concepts are number one, individualism, and number two, materialism. So individualism basically is the idea that we have to go and individually prove our self-worth. So that means leaving the home, going off, and I think particularly men, like we feel a pressure to do this.
Not being dependent on other people, right?
Not being dependent on other people.
Self-supporting and
Right.
yeah.
So like you could completely like insult a person by being like, you're the guy who lives in your mom's basement, right? So, but that's a cultural thing. Like we basically are saying it's unacceptable that you haven't broken off to do your own thing on an individual basis. So then that sets us off where now we're like going out, we're focused on basically like separating into our own space, proving our worth. Now I'm in my own home. I don't live with my parents anymore. My parents are not allowed to come and live with me because that would be a sign of weakness, right? I'm doing my own thing. They're doing their own thing, right? And then the materialism side is basically the pursuit of wealth to like outwardly demonstrate your value. Right? I am worth something because of the car that I drive, because of the size of the home that I have, because of the clothes that I wear.
What I can offer.
What I can offer. And don't get me wrong, I want to look nice, right? I'm not gonna like sacrifice that. But I also am like basically the product of this cultural phenomenon where we value individualism, we value materialism. But in this process, there are trade-offs, right? Because at some point, the pursuit of those two things pushes you so far that basically you have made the decision that you're going to sacrifice relationships in the interest, and it's getting harder, right? Value, like basically wealth has gone down. So now for us to sustain the lifestyle of our parents, we have to work harder, and the generation below us, it's even harder for them.
So the mechanism, if we're oversimplifying, is that those signals of isolation then drive our body to be in a stress state, and that stress is causing inflammation. Tell us.
Because you never feel safe. You never feel safe. Like
even when you think, oh, I just locked my door at night and I have my gun in the safe and I'm protecting my castle and look how hard I've worked, I don't feel safe.
Can you give us a physiological explanation for what happens to a body when it is lonely?
Well, so it's basically like going to set you into this sympathetic state. So, whether it's loneliness, or we could actually broaden this conversation to trauma, to say that they've actually done brain studies on people who were subjected to trauma. And what they find is that there's a specific part of the brain that lights up, which is the amygdala. And the amygdala is our fear center, which gets activated. You know much more about this than I do, Mayim. But so you could like absolutely teach this part. But like basically this is the part of our brain that gets activated when we get scared, right? But like basically what we're saying is the person who's been subjected to trauma, they live in that fearful state, right? And so basically what we see is that in this context, it's like if sympathetic overdrive is basically like too often you're pushing your foot on the accelerator, right? These people, it's a lead foot, and it's just like the accelerator is down and it's never letting up.
Well, the other thing it leads to, with which Johann Hari talks about, is that you're now predisposed to all these ways in which to try and cope with that feeling. So I'm going to be more prone to scrolling online for 7 hours a day, and I'm then going to be angry at all the content that I see, which is only going to make me more stressed, or I'm going to shop, or I'm going to be addicted to gambling and sports betting, which is now proliferating.
And also, the dietary choices that you make from a place of loneliness are different, right? Meaning if you have less time, less motivation to cook, to be out, to be buying fresh produce, right? To be cooking for yourself, taking that time and effort, that's to me though kind of a secondary, set of effects. What's happening when you're in sympathetic overdrive is all the things that we know. It leads to inflammation, right? It leads to also the breakdown of kind of like the aspects of cellular repair that most of us rely on to sort of keep the body together, right? So you're then more prone to these other kind of like diseases of loneliness, right?
Well, to close the loop, and by the way, I kind of think you were both saying the same thing.
We do that a lot.
In different realms, right? So basically, you're both describing junk, in the sense of like, if you have a bad night's rest, what do you want for breakfast, right? You're not going to cook that like that healthy meal. You're going to go and find that donut, right? You want junk food, right? But then, like Jonathan, what you were just describing to me was junk food for the soul. Right? Like that is a person who's starving for a purpose and an understanding and what they're there for, and they're not aligned. And because they're not aligned, they're out there searching for that, sadly, like desperately, right? So I kind of think we're talking about the same thing. And just to close the loop, because I want to make sure that I'm totally clear on like what are the effects on the gut and how does this relate to the immune system? So there's a core thesis in the book, which is that the gut microbiome, these 38 trillion microbes, mostly in our colon, That is actually our first line of defense.
My colon is my first line of defense.
Your microbes inside of your colon is your first line of defense. And we know this, Mayim, because if I were to give you antibiotics, your risk of developing an infection actually goes up dramatically, right? So when you destroy those microbes and you break down that first line of defense, you actually expose yourself to risk of other infections. And then the second layer of defense is the gut lining, so which we call the gut barrier, which when it breaks down, I might call it an increased intestinal permeability. People commonly refer to this as leaky gut. I think that's completely fair game. So, and when you have leaky gut, then things can sneak across this gut barrier that's supposed to be like there to basically protect us and keep the bad stuff out. Things can sneak across and they can get access to our bloodstream. But before it gets to our bloodstream, that's where our immune system lives. 70% of our immune system's in the lining of our gut. So then our third layer of defense is our immune system, which steps up to defend and protect. But when the immune system becomes activated, that's inflammation, right? So inflammation is the activation of the immune system. So when we're in sympathetic overdrive, we actually sacrifice our gut health. We sacrifice our gut barrier because in that moment where survival is essential, that's not the priority, right? That can wait till later. But unfortunately, when we're always in sympathetic overdrive, then basically we're just continuing to progressively sacrifice those things. And when you disrupt the gut microbiome, you're going to disrupt the gut barrier. And when you do that, you're going to basically activate inflammation. This is how you land in this place.
What are the three most common ways that we are disrupting our gut microbiome?
Ultra-processed foods would be like probably the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is our circadian rhythm is completely out of whack. We were designed to have a daily pattern, a daily rhythm, and we're not even doing the basics in terms of allowing our body to even know what time of day it is. So our body's totally confused and flailing. And then the third thing that I would say is getting back to this idea of like sympathetic overdrive, whether that be trauma or feeling lonely or not being aligned with your purpose. All of those things can basically put you into a sympathetic state.
You say spiritual health and people who have a spiritual practice have significantly less substance abuse, better coping with illness and adversity, less depression and anxiety, lower blood pressure, fewer strokes, fewer heart disease, less Alzheimer's, and they live longer.
I am not proposing a hack. I am proposing an honest conversation with yourself. So I'm not even proposing an outward participation in religion. I'm proposing that it's an inward choice to, in a quiet moment, open up your heart and contemplate the possibility of something bigger.
I have a very personal connection to this because there were definitely times early in my career. I had a kid when I was 29. I was at that same time trying to start a career in Hollywood in a shrinking economy. And there was a reality, right? Like there was a financial reality of like, I have a kid, I have a wife, I have bills to pay. And I'm like, I'm stressing the heck out. My mind is racing all the time. And it was the worst I'd ever felt. I was depressed. I was angry. I couldn't really enjoy the just unbelievable blessing that was this young child in my life because I was just like constantly revving and I didn't know how to slow down. And so as pressures of the world increase, it's like kind of easy to say we have to find ways to slow ourselves and find ways to let access the parasympathetic systems, right? Because, and a lot of people are like, okay, I hear that, but then like also my car is being towed and all these things are happening and like, how do I actually do it? But you're not suggesting a hack. You're suggesting that we need to actually find like a larger purpose for our lives because without that, like without some context, without being able to just even in a micro moment start to connect to something else, like it feels like a lot of people are lost.
Completely agree that it feels like people are lost. And this is why I felt compelled to write this. And the other reason I felt compelled to write this, Mayim, because you kind of asked me like, why did you feel like you had to do this? Is that, my personal story is like about healing myself and discovering things that like changed my life. And as a medical doctor, when you find something that changes your own life, how could you deny that to your patients, right? So, and with that in mind, I think that, so first of all, being an adult is hard.
Too much paperwork.
it's it's just nonstop, right? And I feel like it has gotten harder and gotten more complicated as time has gone on. There's more financial pressure than there used to be, right? That being said, if there is a priority in our life, like I'm a true believer of this. I just like, let's keep it real for a minute. If something really matters to you, let your actions show that, right? So whereas if you say that something matters to you, but then that's not the way that you live your life, how could we believe that that's actually true, right? So if it matters to you to create space and time to spend with that child, you figure out a way. You're never gonna be perfect. None of us are. But you're figuring out some sort of way to create the space and time that you need for that connection to mature and be special, right? And the same is true with this idea of spiritual purpose. I'm not asking for you to give 3 hours a day. I'm saying that if you take 10 minutes in the morning as a part of your morning routine, you will feel the difference. It could be that small.
I mean, the thing that happened for me was that I actually got connected to a spiritual center, and they had one evening a week that was like a $25 drop-in. And I would just start to go, and I started to make connections, and I started to have and be a part of conversations that were helping me see a different way of being. And it was not, it was like, instead of date nights, we started going there, and that started to build a practice of, instantiating that into our lives instead of just like going. So like there are ways that people can find community, can take 10 minutes, that you don't have to change your entire life, which I think people can feel overwhelmed by.
To people who have never experienced this, it feels very distant, and they're not sure if they even want to check it out, right? And I can only speak for my own experience, which is that I was raised Catholic, but it wasn't inspired. We went to church for an hour once a week. It was check that box. You did what you were supposed to do as a Catholic. So my family's Polish,
Yeah.
yes, and when I graduated high school, I went off to college, and I didn't go. I didn't go to church. Like I didn't feel any real connection to God. Like it didn't actually mean anything. It was just the practice, the thing that we did every week. And I went through this entire period of time where I was struggling and trying to figure out my life. And when I wrote Fiber Fueled, my first book, it was very easy for me to share the part that I'm not ashamed of, which is, hey, I changed my diet. I lost 50 pounds, right? Like, look at all these wonderful things that came from me replacing my junk food diet with a healthy plant-based diet. Look at all these wonderful things. And so I gave it to my patients, right? But like, actually, that was not a completely honest conversation because there were things that I was too ashamed to share.
The things that you were afraid to share, were those things that you were conscious of, but felt like it didn't have anything to do with the rest of your, experience as a doctor? Or were you afraid to share those things?
There's a few things, Mayim. Number one, I think that we mature at a different rate within different parts of our life. So it's kind of like intelligence. I think that there's many forms of intelligence. It's not just like, are you book smart? And so with that maturity, like my food maturity, like what I ate, my diet, that was easy. Like 2012 to 2015, 16, boom, I was in business. Like I was thriving, right? But what was lagging was specific relationships in my life, which I discussed in chapter 8, and also my relationship with the higher power, with God. Like that's what was lacking, right? And it needed to be dealt with. If we're going to go there, let me come out and be honest, because my hope is that there's people out there that are going to read this and it inspires them to make choices, right? So I came from a broken home. When I was 7 years old, let me just say, my father is deceased. My mom is a wonderful person. I dedicated this book to her, and she went to night school to provide for me and my brothers. Like she's an incredible human. When I was 7 years old, second grade, one day, out of the blue, my mom picks me up with the van packed. We leave Syracuse, New York, and we drive about 7 hours away.
Without your dad?
My dad was not there, right? So All I knew was we reconstituted our life. I was at a different school, completely different people.
I'm just thinking about your sympathetic nervous system, because also when you think of how children deal with this information, right? It's a whole different ballgame.
It's a whole different ballgame because kids
You have to compartmentalize it.
Kids lack the maturity or the life experience to be able. I mean, and the cognitive maturity, right? Like your brain is developing.
Sure.
Right. So so we end up at this different place, and basically the court system says you have to come back to Syracuse, New York. So we go back to Syracuse, and the way that the court dealt with this is the 1980s.
Yeah. It was new.
Was basically to say, hey, there's 3 boys. Will is the oldest. Let's basically assign counselors, psychologists, let's put him in a room with them, have them spend time with him and hear what he says or what comes from him, and then use that information to figure out this custody battle that's happening, right? So, the problem was I'm doing these weird exercises where they got me drawing pictures and I'm 7 years old, but I'm smart enough to understand what's going on here, which is that my parents are having a fight and the court is going to figure out, and what I say ultimately ends up in that place. And I'm not going to hear it myself, but the words that I use are going to ultimately affect what happens in that place.
It's a lot of pressure.
Responsibility.
I went through this and, let me say, because I haven't made this clear yet, that actually, my dad, I didn't understand, that he was a great dad and he was trying so hard and I couldn't see that. And when I think there's something psychologically, many of us are products of divorce, many of us. I hope for as many people as possible that it was amicable. In this case, it was not. I'd be curious if other people can relate to this psychologically, that in that context, you feel pressure to choose a side. You're going to choose the winner, because then you're going to psychologically rationalize that this is the person who is good and the other one is not. And that's why I spoke the way I did and make the choices that I did, right? So you choose a team. So this created a rift between me and my dad. And I held him accountable for the things that was happening to us as a family, which is that we were poor.
You crafted a story, right? That made sense.
Right. We were going through a hard time as a family, right? This was really sad what we were going through, right? And this is your fault, Dad, right? You weren't man enough. You weren't man enough to step up. You should have handled this, right? As the leader of this house, you should have made sure that we were all okay, that Mom was okay. So that was in my mind what was going on. And that led to a rift between me and my dad. And as I grew older, my parents were divorced. My mom, she went back to school. My mom, by the way, Mayim, you would love her. Mm-hmm. She had a chemistry degree in the 1970s, a master's degree in chemistry in the 1970s as a woman. And she went back to law school, and she went to nighttime school, right, to provide for our family, because when the divorce happened, all of our money went into the divorce. She went to night school on loans, got a law degree, and became a patent attorney. And ultimately ends up becoming a vice president of General Electric.
That's crazy.
Unbelievable.
So, she's grinding it, right? My work ethic is pure from my mom. And so anyway, but in order for that to happen, we moved 2.5 hours away. So then I started to basically, hey, Dad, I can't hang out with my friends because I have to come to your house. Hey, Dad, I want to play basketball. I want to be good at basketball and thrive on this team, but I can't do that because I have to every other weekend come to your house, right? So basically it creates this rift between me and my dad. And there were things that sort of happened, but again, a lot of this was just me with a narrative in my mind, because what I want the listeners at home to understand is this is the dad that on the weekend by himself was taking 3 boys camping in the Adirondack Mountains all weekend. I didn't understand how hard that could be until I had 4 kids. All right, I'm not taking my kids camping on the weekend by myself. That sounds insane. I would not do that. This is the dad that every single vacation that we had from school, he loads up the car. You're driving either north into Canada, you're driving south down to Virginia. You're basically up and down the seaboard, right? He was trying so hard to make this work. So I go away to college, and ultimately I make the decision, I don't want that guy in my life. I made the decision, I'm cutting him out. And so I cut off communication. I would not accept his call. And this carried on from the time that I was in college, through medical school, through residency. I was a chief resident, and now I'm getting into my 30s. Okay. And I'm like training as a gastroenterologist, and I meet my wife, and she is an angel, and she comes into my life. She is exactly the person that I needed in my life. And she comes in, and yes, I wrote in Fiber Fueled in 2020 about how I changed my diet, and I was inspired by her, right? I wrote about that. But the other thing that she did is she had a hard conversation with me that no one else had ever had with me. Hey, you need your dad. You need to forgive your dad. You need to call your dad. And so one day I picked up the phone and I called my dad, and out of the blue, it's been more than 10 years, and he was in shock. He welcomed me back instantly. Instantly. He did not hold the smallest thing. He just wanted me back. And the first time I saw him after 10 years was at my wedding.
Wow.
So, and we had a series of great years together from that point going forward, where we reconstituted our relationship. I just wish we could have had more. I, to this day, have regrets about the whole thing because it's my fault. And then in September of 2019, I don't know, tell me if I'm crazy, but like sometimes I feel like when something big is about to happen, people can feel it ahead of time. The two examples that I have is, one, I have an aunt who we were talking about before we started the show. She passed away young, and it was completely unexpected. She was a nurse. She left the hospital. She had a cerebral aneurysm. She collapsed and passed away. She was, in her 50s. But if you looked at her last like 6 months, it was like she was on a tour. Like she was calling up all the friends that she hadn't talked to in 10 years. She was going to all the places that she wanted to check off, that she wanted to go to. It was wild, right? And then with my dad, summer of 2019, I felt this compulsion. You got to go see your dad. He's in upstate New York by himself. He's 70 years old. You don't know how much longer he's going to be around. You got to get up there and see him. So I fly up in September of 2019, and we had this weekend where basically he was a diehard Syracuse sports fan. I was too. This is how we manifested like a lot of the positives in our relationship. So we went to the Carrier Dome to see Syracuse play the #1 football team, and we almost beat them. Then we popped into the mountains. I told you we used to go camping every weekend. We went up into the Adirondacks. We went to all of our favorite places. And then as we're coming down from the mountains and he's about to take me to the airport, he diverts us to Rome, New York, which is about an hour outside of Syracuse. And this is actually where his family was from. And he takes me for the first time at, 40 years old, takes me to the street where my great-grandparents, who were Polish immigrants. Here's these like 600 square foot homes. This is where they lived, right? He shows me literally these places. And I hop on the plane, and that was the last time I saw my dad, because he passed away unexpectedly in January of 2020. Anyway, this story ultimately comes together around the birth of my daughter, who's now 11, because this child is born. And you're holding this child. And I want to get back to this question of faith versus science, because you're holding this child and you know with total clarity that a breath of life came into this body. And that soul, the way that we have a soul, it's undeniable, because you have your own. That soul, it came from somewhere. And science will never be able to explain that. Ever. No matter how far advanced we get, I don't care. You'll never be able to tell me where that came from. So to me, there's a belief that there's something greater there, right? But then having that child helped me to process and understand my relationship with my dad, because the love that I felt for her in that moment, I realized it's the same love that he had for me. I was the confused one. He always had the love. I rejected that love.
That's really, really powerful. I mean, I want to think about that moment where, it is often our partners who can see the thing that we're holding that's causing us pain. What was it like for you to make that first phone call? What changed afterwards?
It was a release, because I think that if you look at my life in my 20s into my early 30s up to this point, there was a lot of sadness. And I would manifest that in different ways. One is I'm going to prove my worth through my accomplishments. Right. So I accomplished all of my goals, yet I didn't actually ever feel satisfied.
Because it's almost like you're anger accomplishing.
I'm angry. I'm going to show you, Dad, that I can do the things that you couldn't do.
That's revenge, drinking the poison that you think will hurt someone else.
Yeah. So you're doing it through, you're basically manifesting these big accomplishments. I had basically every single thing that I wanted to fulfill, I was doing it. Right. But I wasn't happy. I was never satisfied. And I had extremely low self-esteem. And then I'm in the hospital system.
It's intense, no? Competitive?
I mean, not only is it intense, I think it's abusive.
I think it's a little psychotic.
And
let's see what happens if you stay up for 4 days. Can you still save someone's life? What? That's how we train doctors.
I mean, they have some rules around that, and there is a counterpoint to it, which I understand, which is that you have to have time with patients, right? To learn. That's where learning happens. But at the same time, when you are walking and you're not safe to drive home from 30 hours of working nonstop,
also, what are we testing? Do you know what I mean?
Right. So that's not healthy. But then what I would do is okay, so you just did this 30-hour shift. So then you're going to basically go home, pick up $20 worth of Taco Bell on the way home, smash that, fall asleep with the belly full of junk, right? Wake up, drink alcohol, and then go back to work the next day, right? You're just flogging your body, right? But you wouldn't actually do a lot of those things. I mean, the hospital has requirements, don't get me wrong. But if you were in a happy place, you wouldn't be so insane about it all.
You wouldn't have gone to med school.
I can only speak to the male experience. How many people are holding on to resentment, to anger? It's like a very young boy response to be I'm going to reject you because I feel rejected. And holding that, which is really just a deep sadness. When you were talking, I felt anger, but what's more true is sadness, and how bad we are often at processing that sadness and how we try to solve it through these external accomplishments.
The sadness was the root issue. And the rest was the manifestation of oldest boy, big brother, who's firstborn, oldest brother of 3, who's going to basically step up and show the world. And so, but not in a healthy way.
So when you said that it shifted, talk to us about that shift. Was it lighter? Was it softer? Was it more at peace? What happened when you actually made the connection and let go a little bit?
Part of what had to happen was I had to go back to and revisit the 7-year-old boy. And I had really tried to avoid that my entire life.
Not calling your dad was almost locking that part of you away.
You reach a certain point, Jonathan, where it's you're committed, so it's hard to walk it back, because then you have to accept that you were wrong. So it's a lot easier to sort of uphold this position of he's a scumbag, which he was not. Right. But it was easy to just kind of dismiss the guy like that. And but really what I needed to do was I ultimately needed to process my childhood and reconsider it through the eyes of an adult, particularly an adult with children, to be able to understand the things that were happening that I couldn't understand because I was so young.
What does that look like? What's that revisiting? Is that talk therapy? Did you go do ayahuasca in South America? What was your particular journey for, because I think a lot of people would be well, how do I do that? You just think about it? How did it work?
In general, Mayim, I think each of us needs to find our own path towards healing. And so like what I personally did isn't necessarily what I would recommend.
Sure.
Right? It's just what I did. Without any professional training in this space. I'm also not claiming to be a psychologist, right? But for me, it was just kind of like conversations with my wife and processing stuff, quiet times where you're sort of processing stuff, thinking about stuff, going back to, sort of, okay, hold on, let me think about this a different way.
Yeah, you opened your heart is what you're describing, right?
My parents went through this thing. They went through a really hard time. And I, to this day, don't really understand it because like we never opened up that conversation. I don't even know that I want to be honest with you. Because I don't know that I wanted those kinds of intimate details. They're adults, right? They made adult decisions. But the other thing that I came back to was that I never actually heard my dad say a bad thing about my mom. And there were a few times that his parents, like his mom, started to go there. And he shut it down. And as a kid, I didn't really connect to that or see that. And then as an adult, as I started to process all these things, I went back to, gosh, that says a lot.
It says an enormous amount. Having gone through a divorce, we both have, like, the protecting of the way in which the other parent is spoken about is like really important.
It's kind of like the comeback story of the century, at least in my own life, which is to imagine a person that you actually thought was a bad person and to actually come full circle to the realization, actually, he was a great dad. He always was there for us. We were the center of his world. He gave everything that he had for us.
Well, I think that's sort of also the place that maybe you can broaden out, kind of your experience a little bit and help people. How do you generalize this if the story that you have does not have that kind of ending, right? And what is that like, in a nervous system, right? That does not have the ability to resolve. And there's a lot of conversation, there has been a lot of conversation over the past months over, should you speak to your parents? Who decides what is toxic, right? What's the story that you have? What's the story you inherited? And what story do you continue to tell that can perpetuate either destructive relationships or ones that facilitate health and growing? And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what does it look like if you don't have that support waiting for you on the other side of reconciliation? What does it do to the nervous system? And are we then in a conversation about trauma, right?
I think that we are. I think that trauma, so first of all, not everything is trauma. Not everything that's bad is trauma. We, I think, overuse the term at times. But at the same time, trauma can be broad. I mean, basically, the definition from my perspective of what is trauma is something that occurs that overwhelms your ability to cope.
Mm-hmm.
It basically leaves a wound. It leaves an imprint on your soul, right? And it comes in many forms. It's not just abuse. It's not just physical or sexual or whatever it might be. Those are classic things. And it's also not just childhood. But there are life events, and one life event for one person may not be traumatic, and for another person, the way in which it touches them, it is.
And trauma also stacks. We know this from the way sort of like the physiology of this system works, is that if you have a traumatic event, it raises the baseline of what will further potentially cause trauma, which is why, when you have a significant loss, it brings up every other loss you've ever had, and you start thinking about things you didn't know. All of these things stack. So depending on what you experienced as a child, you might be more likely then to be impacted more significantly later.
And this is getting back to what Jonathan sort of led us into in this conversation of the concept of like the conscious mind versus the non-conscious mind. Right? And those parts that they're there, but you're not actually able to access them. But like clearly they're there and they manifest, right? This entire idea of the body keeps the score, like this is the perfect title for that book because it's so true. There was a study, by the way, Mayim, where they took a group of kids that were adopted before the age of 2. And they compared them to controls from a normal family. And they identified that these kids who were adopted before the age of 2, years later, were far more likely to suffer with digestive health problems They had a different gut microbiome pattern. And actually, when they did functional MRI studies, they showed that there was basically increased activity in specific parts of their brain associated with the injury of the trauma. But like a 2-year-old doesn't remember. Like this has clearly affected them, even though they can't remember it ever occurring. So for me, the question that you're asking me is like, how did I deal with this? And basically what I'm saying is that my relationship with my father was traumatic and was continuing to haunt me. But I didn't want to deal with it.
Right.
Right. It was the part of my life that I basically pushed into the corner.
Well, and it was by your own hand, in that the key to the prison, right, was with the prisoner inside.
100%.
You were the one. Right. And I think what's important to mention, you know, for people who, let's say, do come from a situation where a parent wasn't there for them, right? The parent wasn't trying their best. Maybe the parent hurt them. The notion is still the same. And we talk about this with some of the guests we have on who discuss, you know, mystical components, transcendental, you know, aspects of our existence, and even kind of altered states of consciousness. The love that you have, right, which many believe is God-given, right? The love that you have, it contains the capacity to forgive so that you can heal.
That's right. So basically I had to forgive my dad.
Right.
In order to actually heal myself.
Right. And that, because people might say like, well, his dad was great and really trying and my dad didn't try for shit. Guess what? You have the same capacity to move through that and not be married to the story, right, that got you here. And for many people, religion, spirituality, that is a source of something was always taking care of me. I've survived everything up until now, right? Everything that we feel is so impossible and we can't do it, we're here. We found a way to get through it, right?
The process of forgiveness is an opportunity for healing, regardless of what the nature of your relationship with that person is on the other side.
Say that again.
The process of forgiveness is an opportunity for healing, regardless of what the nature of your relationship with that person is on the other side. So even if it's not possible to heal that relationship on the other side, you can still forgive that person.
Right, because that's the gift you give yourself.
And you can build that tribe, right? Because ultimately we do need our tribe. So it does come back to, on some level, that implicit need for human connection, the safety that we get from knowing that like these people are in our lives and they care and love us.
Well, and also if someone, speaking of the other side, if someone has died, that doesn't mean that it's over.
You can call it faith in God, or you can just talk about God as the intelligence that exists in the universe. Earlier, you were kind of talking about how science is showing you just how magical and unbelievable the process of life is.
Yeah.
So I don't see them as separate. So I don't want people to get hung up on the word, but it says, through faith in God, we recognize that our lives are not random. We are part of something eternal, placed here with intention and meaning. And that a relationship with God offers an unwavering source of love, strength, and self-acceptance.
Yeah.
Which speaks so powerfully to this notion of it's not random. Like, yes, there may have been this horrible thing or very painful thing, but when we detach from the narrative of it, how amazingly our lives can change.
Well, and I think that's where the ideas of human connection and spiritual connection, they're complementary pieces. Right? Because we do need the human connection, but at the same time, that spiritual connection is what pulls us through and gives us a framework for processing a lot of these challenging things that happen in our lives. And if you wholeheartedly believe with every bone in your body, right, that you are a child of God and that you are loved and that you were born exactly the way that you were supposed to be, and everything about your life as it is, flaws, warts, and all, is blessed. If you believe that, if you sincerely believe that, it gives you a great sense of safety when you are going through these challenging times, which ultimately this word safety is like what we keep coming back to.
And you will digest better and your immune system is going to be better.
Because you activate your parasympathetic nervous system.
Right. And you're approaching the world with optimism. You're approaching the world with, you know, what we talk about with Bruce Lipton, right? With Joe Dispenza, you know, we've talked about it with Tony Robbins, like, when you are manifesting, right? Like that's what the hipsters call it. When you're manifesting that, it means that you're creating an opening. You're creating the possibility to believe that there's a purpose, right? That there's a reason, that nothing happens, by chance, that there's something larger than us that we can't see that cares for us, whatever that means.
Once again, we come back to this idea of like, we're all ultimately coming to the same conclusion. We're pointing to the sky and saying there's something there, there's something bigger, we're a part of it. And again, I come back to holding my daughter for the first time, feeling that love for her, knowing the way that my own father felt about me, but also knowing that that's the way that God feels about children.
Right. And that's why we also anthropomorphize God. And that's why so many traditions do that, is because that's the best way that we as humans can try and approximate it.
Because
right?
if we were that child who's not
Right.
like capable of understanding yet, that's maybe
Right.
what we are even as fully mature adults. I'd be very curious how you all feel about this. So tell me if I'm crazy. When my dad passed away in January of 2020.
We already like this story.
Okay. We didn't know what happened. And I'm a medical doctor. Like I'm board certified in internal medicine, gastroenterology. Despite that, we didn't know what happened. We had an autopsy done. He died suddenly. The only information that we had is that he called my aunt and said on a Friday night, I'm not feeling well and I'm having diarrhea. And then it was actually MLK. It was January. It was MLK weekend. So on Tuesday, he didn't show up to work. And so then I get a phone call. I'm at work as a gastroenterologist, and I get a phone call from the police.
Oh,
And they say, we're breaking into your dad's house. So because he didn't show up to work. And they found him while I was on the phone. He had an autopsy. And the only thing that the autopsy showed was a little bit of fluid in the lungs. That's it. Nothing else. Heart was fine. No heart attack. No stroke. No aneurysm or something crazy.
No substances in the
No
blood?
substances. He was in great health. He took no medications. There was no good, clear answer to what happened here with my dad, January of 2020. So my friend Mark, who I went to high school with, he told me, because he lost his dad in his 50s. His dad was in his 50s. He died of cancer. Mark was helping me to process. And he says, I want to warn you. He goes, you got to be ready for it. Your dad is going to reach out to you.
what?
Yeah. He goes, I guarantee you, it's going to happen. Your dad is going to reach out to you. Okay.
Does Mark believe this about all dads?
Well, I think that he thinks that an early death
Okay.
that is unexplained,
Got it.
right? Not
Okay.
not
I'm
resolved.
just trying to check what Mark's point of reference is.
Not resolved at the time of death. That like the person from the other side will want to help you to resolve.
Put some things in order. You can't just leave unexpectedly.
Exactly. So there were two things that happened. This is only a story that I've told my friends. All right. Call
We're
me
your
crazy.
friends.
Yeah, you are my friends. Call me crazy if you will. I'm just going to present the facts.
We've heard
We've
weirder.
heard worse.
Okay, here we go. All right. Welcome to the show. All right. So in March, 2 months later, okay, my friend invites me to come on television in Raleigh, North Carolina, like remotely, right? And I'm going to talk about this new study, right? So, and this is my friend. She knows me really well. She's called me Will a bajillion times. I come on the show. They put my name on the screen. It says Bill Bulsiewicz. I'm a junior. I've always been Will. My dad was Bill. So I was like, this is weird. Why did she put Bill Bulsiewicz on the screen? So, and I have this conversation where the entire segment,
Your dad was also William?
my dad was William Sr.
Okay, great. So your dad was William but went by Bill?
He went by Bill, right?
And
Bill
you're-
Bulsiewicz. It's got a ring to it.
Right. And you're William, but you go by Will.
I go by Will. And then I have a son, and he's not the third because I refuse to do the third thing.
Yeah.
But my son is William, but we call him Liam.
So the name that comes on
The screen
is
is my
literally,
dad.
it's the name only your dad went by.
Only my dad went
And
by.
does she call you Bill or does she call you Will?
I don't remember, but like the name's
she knows that
flashing.
your
on
We
name's
need
the
to get
Will.
the tape.
She knows I'm
Okay.
Will.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
So this name flashes on the screen. So we have this conversation about this new study. So let me tell you what the study was about. Basically, they had identified for the first time, or you have to contextualize, we're figuring things out in the pandemic. They figured out for the first time that COVID can present with GI manifestations.
Oh, yeah.
So they figured out that like basically some people who get severe COVID, the first symptom they get is diarrhea. That's the study. And then so I call up my friend Mark. I'm like, dude, this is what happened on the show. Maybe this is what you were telling me about. So he goes to the website, right, where they posted it. They changed it back to Will.
No.
They corrected themselves. I didn't even ask them to. They corrected themselves. They knew I was Will. So, and it helped me to process, for what this is worth, the only information that I had, which was that my dad had diarrhea and then he passed away. I think that my dad had severe COVID and got an abnormal heart rhythm, which is why he had the fluid in the lungs. So this helped me to process my father's death.
Your dad is an excellent communicator even after he has died.
He made it pretty clear.
So that was the first time.
Now here's to me my favorite one.
Okay.
All right. So again, I grew up a diehard Syracuse sports fan. And one night in April of 2020, I'm sitting at home and it's like 10 o'clock at night and I don't know why, but I felt compelled to turn on this game from 1984.
What?
Okay.
Where do you
Who
get the
feels
game?
compelled to do that?
It's on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's Syracuse versus #1 Georgetown.
Okay.
And for any basketball fans who are listening, Georgetown has Patrick Ewing.
Okay.
Okay.
Good game.
Oh.
And they're playing in the Carrier Dome. And I'm watching this game. Their shorts are super short. They're wearing porn star socks. Like the game is very different from modern basketball. It's hard. It's honestly hard to watch, right? So for 2 hours I'm watching. I'm like, why am I here?
2 hours you're watching this game.
Well, it's a 2 hour game, right?
Okay.
So,
But like you didn't even skip through. You're like start to finish. You're
start to
sitting down.
finish because I felt compelled. I got to watch this game, right? So I'm sitting there.
Do you often watch games?
I mean, I love basketball.
No, but sometimes you'll pull up a game.
This is unlike me to pull up a random game, especially from the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
Like if I were to do
Yeah.
anything, I would pull up a Jordan game or something
Sure.
like this. But even now,
Same.
I'll just watch the documentary.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyways, okay. So I watched this game, and the whole time I'm confused. Why am I even watching this? What am I doing here? And then it comes down to the very last play of the game, where a Syracuse legend, a legendary Syracuse player, Pearl Washington, he's a guard, gets the ball, takes 2 dribbles, and he launches a half-court shot and nails it to beat the #1 team with Patrick Ewing, and everyone storms the court and loses their mind. Everyone goes bonkers, okay? So I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so cool. I waited 2 hours for it, but it was worth it. That was so cool. So the next day, I call up my brother Tim. So he's 2 years younger than me. And my brother was nice enough to, because it was hard for me. I was working, I had kids. My brother was nice enough to resolve my father's estate. And so I call up my brother Tim, and I said, Tim, I don't know why, but last night I flipped on this game, and I described the whole thing of what happened like I just did. He says to me, Will, you are not going to believe this. He goes, I'm in Dad's kitchen right now.
No.
And 3 feet away from me, on the refrigerator, is a picture of the shot that you just described.
What?
Shut the.
I mean, is that a nothing burger or like, come on?
Whoa, that's intense. We need to get your brother calling in. Like, that's a huge, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not crazy because I think the world works like this.
I mean, look, if you think it's just like a synchronicity or whatever it might be, okay, so be it. But like for me, and what I come back to
Yeah,
is,
I mean, look, do you want me to should I play the materialist game? Oh, he doesn't like when I play
she's
this
so
game.
good at
are
playing.
you going to shred me? Are you going to shred me, Mom?
She's
No,
she likes to be a downer sometimes.
Okay.
I'm going to put this out there, and it could not be true. That picture may have been something you had seen.
I hadn't been to my dad's house. I don't even know how long.
But he wouldn't have registered.
Well, this could all be unconscious. I mean, I can believe in the unconscious.
That's fair. No, that's fair. So it could be.
I'm just saying that someone
It could be planted in my non-conscious mind.
You wouldn't take this to Nature Neuroscience and be like, I've discovered that there's after-death communication.
No, because that's not science. That's
correct.
This is faith. We're talking about faith.
Correct. So this is a...
What's really funny about this
smug
podcast
face.
is that she'll play both sides of the coin.
What I was throwing out there was it is possible in the realm of the universe that this image had been for you somehow associated with your dad, even in a way that you didn't realize, right? For any way that could exist. And it's still amazing, though. It's still amazing that you would draw on that and be drawn to it. That's still incredible.
Within the context of processing my
Correct.
father's death unexpectedly.
Totally.
Yes, and it could be that that is true and that you were drawn by something outside of yourself that encouraged you and pushed you to watch that game that you had a connection with. Not mutually exclusive.
Unless we had the ability to go somehow
Sure.
and like actually see what's in the non-conscious mind, right, on a person, you'll never be able to know which of these things it is.
No, it's a lot of zeros and ones is what it is.
So then ultimately we come back to is this question of like faith versus science, where like for me, like having belief in something greater, having belief that actually the best is yet to come, it helps me in this moment to process this, to understand that this conversation with my dad, these things that I'm saying here on a podcast, but I never actually got to say to his face, he deserves to hear those things. And my belief system allows me to know, like to truly believe that I will have the chance to do that.
Or that you're doing it right now, that the things that you're sharing are resonating and have some sort of frequency and they are not limited by this time and space, and that he may be experiencing some of this.
That may be your belief system, Jonathan. But
Oh my.
Well, no, what I'm saying is if that's the way that you process it, then that's true for you. And whereas for me, I see it as there's some sort of way that he's able to communicate. I don't know if he can hear me. I don't know if he can right now, right? But what I do wholeheartedly believe is that when my time on this world is over, I will be with him again, right? And one day my children will be with me again. And there's a beautiful, wonderful place that we'll be together.
Jonathan's also, referring to this notion that, we're all in some sort of quantum consciousness field, that everything we're experiencing, it's data, right? It's data, it's information. And if you zoom in on this microphone, this table, your, eyeball and the curtain, it's all the same. Like we're all made of the same things. So in that sort of quantum field, right, the notion is that like time, the notion of like time as linear also exists as a construct, right? That as people describe it who have, had incredible near-death experiences, you can cut through time like a 7-layer cake, right? And all of these things are kind of stacked and in this sort of like beautiful quantum field. So in that sense, I think that's what Jonathan was also referring to, is the notion that like was, is, and will be, which is also, kind of a biblical reference to like the existence of divinity, that all happens at the same time. Even since you wrote Fiber Fueled, so much continues to change and evolve. One of the things that's changed and evolved is GLP-1s, which obviously have existed, but the use of that drug, I think, has really changed the landscape of how we view health.
Yeah.
Because I know many people, taking it and they're thrilled because they no longer eat, and so they're getting really skinny. Like that's my super layperson's explanation of the way that I have heard people talking about it. Obviously, it's an incredible drug. It's an important drug for people who need it, for diabetes. Like I'm all about it, but it's really changed the conversation around food because people are also trying to then maximize what they do need to eat. In addition, fasting has become a much more talked about topic. And another arena where, yes, if you eat less calories, you're going to be consuming less. What do those kinds of changes mean for you as you tackle Plant Powered Plus? And what other things have you seen shifting? I mean, I've heard so many more people talking about keto, so many more people doing the like pure meat diet. Like none of this will ever make sense to me, but maybe I also am missing something. What's changed? What do you see as kind of the main features of this landscape?
So first of all, it is wild how quickly we can flip from like diametrically opposed diets and make them the trendy diet of the moment, right? We went from literally, there was like nothing in between. We went from basically a vegan plant-based diet in 2020 to by 2023, carnivore was the trendy diet and vegan was way out.
Also, our perception of body positivity changed in that time as well, right?
Our perception of body positivity changed because in some ways we went from having to rectify what our own lives are, which is that 75% of America was at least overweight, right? So having to like sort of rectify that and accepting that, like, you know, when you look out at America, that's normal. That doesn't mean that that's optimal, but in processing that, that's one of the ways that we sort of processed that. And, you know, and along came these GLP-1s.
We went from me liking the mannequins at Target to them not needing those mannequins anymore because we're going to go back to the other mannequins.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. I guess I just haven't been shopping at Target that much. But yeah, so, and I think that like the key thing, first of all, that I want people to hear is that the thread of science doesn't flip in 3 years. So it doesn't flip on its head like that. That's completely insane.
I think most people would say, what do you mean? Because I'm even like, I don't know.
Science is a build. We're constantly refining ourselves. We're constantly adding new information that we can apply to our knowledge base. And that does cause shifts, but the shifts are small, right? You can continue to sort of refine. So as I write a book, I'm coming from the perspective of like, I don't start with the outcome or the end point. I start with the science. What does the data show for me to help you to get to the end point? Everyone wants to be in like a camp of like, hey, I'm on this side. I'm in favor or I'm against, right? When like the truth is, these are nuanced conversations. So for the people who need these drugs, because there are many, I am so glad that we have these drugs. They need these drugs. They are going to be better. They will be healthier. They will reduce their risk of disease because they're using these drugs.
It's a lifesaver for some people.
But at the same time, there's a part of me that's a little bit sad about our process, because basically our process was that we're going to create a lifestyle, including a diet, that puts us into such a health crisis that we need a solution. And then the solution that we propose is not to actually examine the lifestyle and diet that got us there. The solution that we propose is to leave that alone, eat what you want to eat, live how you want to live, but take this drug. And there is a part of me that says, and this is just being upfront and honest as a medical doctor, like people who defend these drugs, they're like, well, we know a lot. We've been using them for 8 years, 10 years, right? Every single, first of all, there are many side effects at baseline, and I'm not trying to like fearmonger with that, but like every drug has side effects, and there are definitely side effects with these drugs. But also, every single drug, the more experience that we get, the longer the time goes on, the more that we realize unintended consequences that we couldn't see coming. For most of my career as a gastroenterologist, so you have to understand, Jonathan, if you come to see me with acid reflux, there is this knee-jerk reaction. As a gastroenterologist, you don't even have to think. It's just like, zing, I'm writing a prescription for Nexium. I'm writing a prescription for Protonix. These are drugs called proton pump inhibitors, all right? And for most of my career, the way that I saw it was there's no downside other than the cost. Whatever it costs is the downside. But other than that, there's no side effects.
You're just inhibiting a proton pump. What could go wrung?
Right. You're alleviating symptoms. People feel better fast. They work. These drugs work.
That.
Right. Yes. So, and like patients, you know, they loved it, right? Because they showed up for a solution. You gave
Everybody
them a solution.
was on it.
Yeah. So you put them on it, they're on it in perpetuity, right? And then the problem is that what we haven't really done is taken a step back to say, okay, well, what role does stomach acid serve in our body, right? It's because it's there for a reason. Didn't just show up for no reason. So, and there were these studies that started to show up about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, like think 2010 to 2015, okay, where they were like, hey, proton pump inhibitor use is associated with dementia. Hey, proton pump inhibitor use is associated with chronic kidney disease. Hey, proton pump inhibitor use is associated with cardiovascular risk.
And just because you didn't know about the side effects doesn't mean there weren't any.
The way that gastroenterologists process this, and keep in mind that there is a steady drumbeat of pharmaceutical reps providing lunch to your office. And this is sort of the trade, is like they provide the lunch for your office. Your staff is very happy because they get their food, and then they get some time with you. And you sit there and you have a chat, and they're going to frame these studies for you, the pharmaceutical rep to the medical doctor.
And the pharmaceutical rep, I just want people to know, is not a medical doctor.
Definitely not a medical doctor.
Like really not a medical doctor.
No.
Like with all due respect to pharmaceutical reps,
They're
a salesperson.
They've been given talking
They're a
points
salesperson.
by their sales lead to say this is how you can make sense of this.
That's
and
a
there is
salesperson.
regulation. There is regulation, to be fair. There is regulation of what they're allowed to say and what they're not allowed to say.
Yes, but they are
right?
not medical doctors.
They're not medical doctors, but within that sort of regulatory framework, you can figure out, right? These are big businesses that have tons of resources to figure out the right way to basically activate their entire nationwide army.
The series on Netflix about OxyContin, they focus specifically on the pharmaceutical reps and the sales techniques that are used by these companies to get their message out.
Well, and to be fair, that's a whole different level of
Totally.
nefarious.
I'm just saying in terms of the way
infrastructure.
the way that the business works.
But the issue is, and Mayim, you know this from your academic background, that science is very open to debate, right? That like it's very hard to make something so cut and dry that you couldn't have a discourse. So the issue is if it's open to debate, then you take these studies that find these associations with these health conditions and you present the argument that it's not real.
So what does the rep say when they're over lunch?
I could tell you, just like he's presenting it and saying these associations are something to be concerned about, they'll pull out stats and they'll be like, oh, in a placebo study, we found this and it's not statistically significant. There's every reason that you're saying that it is something to be concerned about, they have something to counter it with.
You've heard of the healthy user bias. So the healthy user bias is when they find that something is beneficial is because really what you're studying is like, these are the healthy people who are exercising and sleeping and right. So this is like the opposite of that, which is that the argument becomes that you're detecting comorbidities, meaning like other health conditions in people that the entire reason that they came to the doctor in the first place is because they're generally sick, right? That if they were healthy people, they would have never come to the doctor. They would have never needed this drug. So you basically say, well, the drug is not,
They were going to die anyway.
and they're basically saying it's not caused, right? Like it's not the proton pump inhibitor
Correlation,
causing
not
the problem. It's
causation,
correlation, not
right.
causation.
So how do you make sense of it?
Basically fast forward to as I'm like studying the microbiome, which is this new thing. And I'm like, I would like to think of myself as a pioneer in the space because I was thinking about these things and writing about these things before other people were.
You were annoying me about my gut before I knew everyone would be worried about my gut.
I was writing about fiber 5 years before fiber maxing.
That's right.
Right? So, all right, which I appreciate those kids for doing that. As I was learning about the gut, you start to ask the question, whoa, time out, hold on. I've like totally dismissed these studies, but what if stomach acid is there because it keeps our microbiome in balance? And if you take that stomach acid away, which is meant to have a specific effect on your microbiome, it allows the overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine, which we know with total clarity at this point that small intestine bacterial overgrowth is associated with the use of these drugs. SIBO. And if you have that health condition, then that's indicative of a broader dysbiosis. And if you believe, like I believe, that the gut microbiome is connected to the brain, is connected to the kidneys, is connected to the heart, is connected to the immune system, then right there, you just identified the potential mechanism where a proton pump inhibitor could be associated with increased risk of Alzheimer's, chronic kidney disease, or heart disease. So my point with the GLPs is that we have kids that we're putting on these drugs.
We also have adults at a healthy body weight who are being put on these drugs.
Well, putting themselves on these drugs. they're
Well, I've walked into more than one office at a size 8, 10 to be asked if I'd like a GLP, to be approached at what would be considered in also any other city, right? In America, pretty much as, oh, this is a body weight. Yeah, if you live in certain places, that's seen as a detriment.
What do you see for the kids, though? You're starting them so early. Where do you see this going?
Or like someone our age even, right? Like what happens when you use these drugs for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years? Because here's the issue, is that we don't know what's going to happen when you use it that long. But if you take the drug away, the weight comes back.
A friend of mine said she forgot her medicine or whatever, ran out. She said she practically ate the table that the food was on. She said it was like your whole brain comes back. She's like, I'm going to be on this drug forever.
And I don't mean for this to sound like a conspiracy. Like, I don't think that there's like a nefarious thing. I think that what we have here is these are pharmaceutical companies that they're a business. They're incentivized to sell. And unless we forced them to, They would never do something to undermine their own business. That would be stupid, right? But the problem is that the study that we need is to answer the question, how do we put a person on this drug, change other things, not just the drug itself, change their diet, change their lifestyle, and then ultimately at some time point in the future, maybe it's 1, 3, 5 years, we remove the drug and they still maintain most of the weight loss. How do we accomplish that? We need that study, but the drug company is never, ever going to fund that study.
They do not want that as the business model.
No, and so what we have here is we have an on-ramp onto the highway of GLP use for life, and you're not getting off the highway.
What is the argument in your perspective for like the worst case scenario for what it might be doing to the body long term?
Is it the perineum swelling one?
Oh dear.
Don't some of them, right? Don't some of them have that horrible warning?
I don't know.
am not
Yeah,
sure.
one of them has a warning where I'm literally like having to give my teenagers a biology lesson about what the
perineum.
Correct. I'm like, I did not expect this during Family Feud. Because a lot of these drugs they have to read all the side effects. And I'm thinking this is more information than anyone needed at 7 p.m.
If we're following the understanding of potential leaky gut, right? These people likely don't have great metabolic function to start with. They may be having leaky gut. You're not addressing any of the emotional issues. All you're doing is restricting the need for food. Likely they're on the drugs. Their gut is still leaky for the food that they are having. They may be having compromised immune function. They may be, still in a very highly activated state potentially. Like,
Okay,
where does that go?
Well, so we have to present both sides of this because
For sure.
Because the issue is that if you take a person like if these drugs are properly applied within the context of obesity, when you reduce their weight and you bring them into metabolic balance, actually the expectation is that the leaky gut will improve and that inflammation actually subsides. And there's data to back that up.
Well, they also would need psychological support, nutritional support, support that we don't really have an infrastructure for in this country presently, but they would need tools.
Well, that's where the ball gets dropped because that's not actually part of the equation, Mayim. So basically, the equation is basically like you're overweight. We want to give you this drug. Here's the drug. We're going to tell you the side effects because we're required to do that. And then you're going to take the drug and then whatever happens, happens. That's not the same as presenting the drug with surrounding support.
Well, or saying the God-shaped hole is shaped like all of your favorite junk food, right? And what this drug does is it makes you think that the God-shaped hole is full, largely because we are bowing to the God of vanity, right? Materialism, all these things. I mean, not to paint with, again, too broad a brush, but when you take that drug away, guess what? Your God-shaped hole is waiting for you. It's like, put all the junk food in there. That's the shape that we are today.
The problem too, Jonathan, is that if you cut calories, but you don't change your diet, you're taking a junk food diet that kind of got you into this mess in the first place, and you're just shrinking it down. It's a total setup for nutritional deficiencies. Who knows where that takes us, right? We already have nutritional deficiencies with a full-size diet.
And we know that losing weight like that, you don't lose it the same way that you would if you're doing it by other means. You can tell by sort of the structure of people's faces, right? When people call it Ozempic face, it's literally that like fat deposits, things are placing themselves in different ways that we are already seeing do have an impact on muscle mass, on things like that, which especially for women where we're losing estrogen and all these things that help with muscle mass and building up our strength, these things can also be working in opposition.
What does a nutritional deficiency look like? I think some people will be like, well, I might be a little deficient, but I'll just supplement. But my suspicion is that it starts to present weird problems that then you go to a different doctor for and they're not looking holistically and you start to get this strange patchwork.
You have to look at like what is the specific nutritional deficiency that we're referring to, right? So like it could be a vitamin B12 deficiency, which could start manifesting with numbness and tingling in your fingers, but then progress into something more complex from a neurologic perspective.
It could be not enough protein because you're eating 2 meals a day and one of them is a salad, right? And you're not putting any protein on it,
It
right?
could be not enough protein, although, and the protein conversation we can absolutely have.
I mean,
but,
please, I need help.
Okay. It could be not enough protein, but I actually think that like our number one deficiency is fiber deficiency. So 95% of America is deficient in fiber before we calorically restrict to them, right? Can you imagine what we're going to like basically, unless you've made it your mission to focus on fiber, when you go onto the GLP-1, you're going to end up in a dramatic fiber deficiency, and that affects your gut.
95% of people are deficient in that?
95%. So Mayim, here's the data. The average woman in the United States.
Nobody eats enough veggies?
No one eats enough veggies or any plant-based food, right? Because they all contain fiber. So the average woman in the United States consumes about 15 grams of fiber per day. She should be getting 25.
Okay.
So she's like 60% of where she's supposed to be. Almost has to double it just to get to the lowest level of normal. Men were actually even worse. The average man is 18 grams per day, but we should be getting 38. So we're less than half.
Why do we need so much fiber, and how much protein do we actually need?
If I were to separate these two, and I think there's value, and they're not mutually exclusive, like they're not in competition with each other. You can have both. All plant-based foods have protein, by the way. So if I were to separate these two, protein is the muscle nutrient, right? Like if you want to build muscle mass, you need sufficient protein in order to actually fulfill that goal. Fiber is the longevity nutrient because not only is it good for our gut microbiome, but it allows us to create from fiber short-chain fatty acids, acetate, propionate, and butyrate. These are the most anti-inflammatory things that I've ever come across. They have healing effects on your gut microbiome. They restore and repair your gut barrier. They directly affect your immune system to suppress inflammation. They help you get these special immune cells called T helper cells that basically are like the peacekeepers of your immune system and help to keep everyone organized and not get out of control and fight each other. And it has healing effects throughout the entire body from head to toe, including your brain, including your blood-brain barrier. Short-chain fatty acids are powerfully anti-inflammatory. So when we are missing protein, it becomes hard to build muscle mass. We get sarcopenic. That's the medical term for having low muscle mass. And when we have insufficient fiber, then we suffer the consequences in terms of our gut health, but also more broadly health throughout our entire body.
In terms of protein, one of the most common things that's changed since, fiber fueled is I would call it an abnormal obsession with meat. Mm-hmm. I blame the internet.
Sure.
I mostly blame men because there's a huge component of the manosphere that is all about how much meat can you eat. And it went from like, as a vegan person, raised when there wasn't any vegan food, you just sort of like ate, noodles with marinara and French fries, right? And salad until the world woke up and tried to give us more options. But this notion of like, oh, you don't need that much protein. Like America's getting too much protein as it is. You can be a vegan and be healthy. And now we're seeing the most unhealthy thing you can be is vegan because there's no way that you can get the massive amount of protein that you need, which can only be achieved through meat. How can these two things exist in the same universe?
I mean, I think that we've gotten totally twisted up. And, protein is a great sell. Like if you want to sell in the nutrition space, you make protein the centerpiece. And people go crazy because they love it. I don't know if it's that we've been sort of conditioned to believe this, right? Through like lots of sort of media through the years, or if it's just like our natural desire to consume that type of food that people have. And then they lean into it. The issue that I see is the amount that's being recommended is like kind of absurd. And the problem that you're bringing up, Mayim, is that, so you'll hear people who say, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Okay. So like I'm 215 pounds, I'm 6'4", 215 pounds. So I'd have to have 215 grams of protein per day.
That feels crazy.
I want to sort of like position this, contextualize this number. Okay. And I'm going to change the scale.
Half that feels excessive, but I don't know.
So half of that wouldn't be bad. You would still be actually half of that you would still be above the minimum recommended amount. So you'd still be safe.
Yeah.
So the minimum recommended amount in grams per kilogram of body weight.
Yes.
Okay, is 0.8. Now, this is 2.2. 2.2 grams per kilogram. So you're almost triple the minimal recommended amount. The amount that I would recommend for the vast majority of people, allow me to dive into the nuance for a quick moment, because there's not a one size fits all number, and male versus female does matter a little bit, but like we have to talk more broadly. The number that I would recommend is 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram. This is the recommended amount in terms of being able to sufficiently provide the amino acids, specifically these amino acids that we would call essential, means you have to get them from your diet. Your body can't make them for you. So it gives you the right amount of those amino acids to build the muscle mass that you're looking for. That way you're not actually depriving your muscles and they can stay as big, plump, and healthy as possible, because muscles are not just vanity organs. Muscles are metabolic, powerfully. They're really important, and they protect us from falls as we get older. One of the biggest travesties in the women's health space through the years is that we have not encouraged women to do resistance exercise, meaning strength training. We've made it sound like cardio is the only way, or yoga. Those are your choices.
Well, because you won't fit into the clothes that they want you to wear.
You need resistance training just as much as I
you.
do. But Jonathan and I, we need cardio just as much as you do.
Well, and broad shoulders in men is seen as powerful and, clothes friendly. And in women, it's seen as like, you have a boyish frame.
If you're going to work out in the gym and you're trying to build muscle mass, then you need more protein. So for example, today, I worked out before I came here. On that particular day, you would be better off being closer to 1.6. But if you're not actively trying to build muscle mass, you're not working out. The vast majority of America is not working out. Then they don't need to be 1.6 because that's an excessive amount of protein. They would be perfectly healthy to be 1.2.
What about the conversation that animal protein is more bioavailable than plant protein? And actually, if you want to get the right amino acids and to make sure that your body is using that fuel, that you need even more plant protein than animal protein.
If we were to make this 1 gram per pound our goal, again, I don't agree with that. Part of why I don't agree with it is that it kind of forces you to either consume animal protein or to take supplements.
I mean, just for context, like a pound of ground beef is about 75 grams of protein. So if I'm trying to get to 200, that's a lot of meat.
That's right. And it would be even harder if you were eating a salad, right? Which has which proportionally doesn't have much protein.
You'd be eating 5 meals a day, essentially, with a large chunk of protein in each of those meals. That's what you have to do.
This is, to me, why I push back against this. It's not so much that I'm scared of the protein. It's more so that you're forcing people into a choice where they're going to basically reduce their plant-based intake. We don't need people reducing their plant-based intake because at the end of the day, if we want to get people healthy, the status quo is a problem, right? And as we sit here today, only 10% of our calories come from plant-based foods. 90% of our calories are coming from either ultra-processed foods, that's the dominant driver, or animal products, right? So if we want to get people healthy, if we want to address our fiber deficiency, we ultimately need to start to increase and incorporate these plant-based foods, which will provide you with the fiber that your body and your microbes are starving for. And there's protein in there. I don't eat meat. I am not struggling for protein. I have not been restricted in my ability to gain in my 40s. I'm 45 years old. I'm lifting the heaviest weights in my life.
What is your primary protein source? I mean, understandable that it's in all the vegetables, but are you adding
I'm a big bean guy. So to me, beans are the consummate microbiome food because they have fiber, resistant starches, and polyphenols. And they're actually quite high in protein, and they're dirt cheap.
They also do have a lot of carbs.
Carbs depends on how you look at it, though, because if the carbs
depends on how my stomach looks at it.
How your stomach looks at it?
Well, I think
because it spikes your blood sugar, or what?
I think for certain, I'm learning more about fat distribution for women. I'm postmenopausal and have been for several years. That is hard to not have weight accumulating in certain places. I think it's a challenge for a lot of women. But I don't know a lot of vegan women, so that's what people always say to me, like, "Oh, you're eating so many beans, it's so carb heavy. You just eat carbs all day."
Well, I would push back against the idea of reducing things to a macronutrient, which is when we say carbs, because fiber is a carb, resistant starches are carbs, right? Those are not contributing calories. If anything, they're reducing calories, right? And they're helping you have better blood sugar control, better gut health, lowering your cholesterol, right? So there's a lot of good that comes from those carbs as opposed to sugar.
I feel better.
If I were to sort of define, okay, metabolically, how would I approach this? I want to basically get the satiating nutrients. right? So fiber and protein are the two main satiating nutrients, which you can get these from plant-based foods. I'm not saying that it has to be all or nothing. That is not the argument, right? The argument is that we are insufficiently consuming the plant-based food. So if we could take whole plant foods and increase them, you would get satiated when you eat. You would know naturally when to stop eating. You would get the fiber your gut needs. You would get the protein your muscles need, and you wouldn't actually need the GLP-1.
Help me understand the internet phenomenon right now that people should only eat sardines, and that butyrate is created from the fat in the sardines, which is actually what's helping line the gut.
I'm so grossed out by sardines. I just want everyone to know that. They're all packed in there and they're laying next to each other. It's just a sad fish.
Well, fundamentally, this is talking about ketosis and the need for our body to be in a ketone creating state, and that when we are in our blood sugar is constantly being spiked, we're never actually using ketones. We're always using sugar. Help us understand this.
Okay. Before we jump into talking about like the butyrate and ketones and things like this, because there is an interesting metabolic conversation, and I want to, despite my implicit desire to just dismiss the whole idea, I would rather just kind of explain it, right? But before we jump in there, any diet where you are told to eat only one thing constantly is a total setup for failure, because there is no perfect food, right? So basically what you're going to take is whatever it is that is most powerfully represented in that food, and ultimately you're going to overconsume it. And anything that ends up overconsumed becomes problematic. But at the same time, sardines or kale, or frankly, any food on the planet is insufficient in something, right? This is the argument for dietary variety.
There's not one food that covers all your bases.
No, there's not one food. And so if you were to eat for variety, you allow the strengths of the individual foods to basically collectively work together, right? And it addresses the deficiencies that exist within that collective whole, right? So, and that's like, to me, the argument for eating variety. And so any diet that tells you, whether it were sardines only, whether it's red meat only, or honestly, whether it's like fruit only, right? That's trash. These are horrible ideas. There's no way that that's a balanced, healthy diet. Even if I believe that within the context of a balanced diet, sardines are healthy, right? There are things that exist within sardines that are good for us, like omega-3s. But the problem is you're going to have like omega-3s dripping out of your eyeballs.
Like you only need so many omega-3s is what you're saying.
Yeah, so omega-3, in the same way that like there's a certain amount of protein that your body actually is going to use, right? If you think about oxygen or water or salt, these are essential nutrients. Our body cannot exist without them. But at the same time, in the hospital, we have the ability to put a person on 100% oxygen, right? The atmosphere is like 21%. We have the ability to put someone on 100% oxygen. Guess what? If you do that for too long, it destroys their lungs. It is not healthy. If you take water, we all need water. We need hydration. You consume too much water,
You can dilute all your electrolytes.
You dilute out your electrolytes to the point that you can actually cause a seizure, right? And if you take salt, we need salt. But if you excessively consume salt, that becomes dangerous. So like with all of these things, there is a proper place, there's balance, but when we go and we just like mono food it, that's insane. That'll never be the right answer. So I don't care how trendy it sounds.
And also, with any fish, we have over-farmed the oceans, lakes, streams, and seas. There's also a huge concern with mercury. Everything that's in the water is in that fish. That's literally its bloodstream, right? So that's also a concern as well when you talk about things like that.
Yeah, the nanoplastics are like a big concern that's emerging right now.
I think, the other part of this is like, okay, let's say it's not forever. I think what that argument is trying to activate is, even if it's on a short-term basis, they're saying, okay, the high protein and high fat content is going to allow the body to stay in ketosis. How important do you see ketosis being? And part of the reason that they're suggesting this is for people who can't get into ketosis. So they're sort of giving them high fat satiating food that allows them to try and get there.
This is the pescatarian version of a carnivore diet. Right? Like it's a zero carb diet, So within it's like basically taking a ketogenic diet, but making it so that it will definitely get you into ketosis because there are no carbs. There's no carbs in your diet at all. And so, okay, let's start from the baseline of acknowledging that the Western diet is complete and total trash. So a Western diet is basically made up of sugar, salt, and junk fat, right? And that I found in my book. So in my book, I described over 130 health conditions, not just GI issues, not just autoimmune issues, over 130 health conditions associated with inflammation and also associated with damage to the gut microbiome. Okay. So now out of those 130, I also found 55 of them where I can pull the study that shows you that the Western diet, which is basically the way we eat in America, right, is associated with an increased risk of that particular disease. Now, that's 55 out of roughly 130. The others, the rest of them, they just haven't studied them yet.
That's one of the most powerful things I think that we can try and communicate to people.
So the status quo cannot be accepted, right? We just can't. So if we move towards a ketogenic diet versus if we move towards a high fiber diet, these are different directions because the ketogenic diet is 0 fiber. The high fiber diet is what I'm proposing, right? Which, to be honest with you, it's not even necessarily high. It's just normal. It's just normal. You're just
having
actually
some.
just getting fiber,
yeah.
Right? Okay. So these are the two
fiber
proposals.
Priority.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you enter into ketosis, your body starts to produce what are called ketone bodies, and the two main ones are beta hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate. Now, I want the listeners, forgive me for being nerdy, but I just want you to log in your brain these names, hydroxybutyrate and acetoacetate. Okay, now let's talk about the opposite side, fiber. When you consume fiber and resistant starches, your gut microbes will release acetate, butyrate, and the third one, propionate. Those are the short-chain fatty acids. Your body was, like, again, this is where we come back to the whole spiritual conversation, magically developed where when you have a food source, you have the ability to produce short-chain fatty acids from that food source, the fiber, right? So you get the acetate, the butyrate, the propionate. But when you don't have a food source, because these things are so important to us and our health, your body will flip into this ketogenic mode to release the acetoacetate and the beta hydroxybutyrate, but they are not the same. It's important to understand they are not the same. They do work at the same receptors. The acetoacetate and the beta hydroxybutyrate is like a messed up key. Like it's not fully entering the lock, but it's kind of entering the lock and it gives you a partial effect. Okay? So basically what we're saying is if you compare this to the Western diet, which does not have fiber and is loaded with junk, if you move into ketosis, at least you get the C-rate version of the short-chain fatty acids. At least you get the C-rate version.
Right, but surprise, surprise, like either skipping meals, fasting, or eating ultra-processed food and junk, neither of those things actually give you the most complete nutrition panel. The only thing that can do that is food.
Real food, right? And what if we move to a whole food diet? And what we're not even talking about has a specific label. So one of the things I talk about in chapter 4 is that I basically say, hey, look, there's evidence for a Mediterranean diet. There's evidence for a pescatarian, which is fish, flexitarian, vegetarian, vegan, and these are all plant-based diets. And it doesn't matter what label you apply. What matters is the quality of the food that you eat. So when you eat a high quality diet, which is made up of whole foods, you have the ability to mix and match these things and bring them together in whatever way makes you happy, that you're actually going to eat, right? Because if I try to force something on you and it lasts for 30 days and then you bail on me, I have accomplished nothing.
What I'm hearing is that most people are eating such junk that it's better for them just not to eat, be in ketosis, have their body generate these fake or replica keys, and they will feel better. But that is ultimately not the way to go about it. The way to go about it is to get the real keys from fiber that we're craving anyway.
100%. And this is also why, like, the fasting trend, and this is not to say I'm against the fasting trend, But this is part of why the fasting trend has helped people is like actually the avoidance of food that is basically shredding you from the inside, you're better off taking a break.
Wow. So it's not that the fasting is actually helping you so much. It's that it's helping you avoid the things that are being destructive versus if you were getting whole foods, nutritional foods that were actually helping you thrive, then fasting wouldn't give you that benefit.
Let's imagine for a moment that you run out to the fast food joint and you get a burger, fries, and a Diet Coke. Okay. And embedded in there is going to be the refined carbohydrate flour that's in the bun. Who knows what else is in there? The burger patty isn't actually just meat. It's just other weird stuff that they've managed to put in there these days in the fast food joints. Fillers and things like this. But there is meat in there, and it's dominantly represented by saturated fat. That's the main fat that you're going to find coming from the meat, right? And then the French fries, it's a fried food. So like it's been cooked at high heat, and when it gets cooked at high heat, it basically releases these oxidized products that are really bad for us. They're actually harmful. And then there's that Diet Coke, which you can feel however you want to feel about Diet Coke, but the problem is it's like it's a confluence of chemicals, right?
And it's hijacking your system.
That are hijacking your system, that are making you crave more, that have negative consequences on your gut microbiome. And it's not just the artificial sweeteners. Like Diet Coke is always brown. Why is it always the same color? I've never seen it any other color other than when Pepsi Clear. Remember Pepsi Clear back in the day?
No one liked that.
No one liked it, right? So they have to add back the color, but that's an artificial chemical that has its own health risks. Here's what's happening on your insides. Your blood sugar spikes, right? Mostly in response to the refined carbohydrates. And that blood sugar spike, when it goes too high, starts to actually erode your gut barrier. So your gut barrier, leaky gut, is getting worse, which is creating inflammation. Simultaneously, your triglycerides, which is a measure of fat in your blood, this starts to go on the rise. Now that's a combination of the refined carbohydrates from the bun and also the saturated fat from the burger, right? So, or like the starch, the junk starch from the fries, right? So your triglycerides start to rise. But we actually have some research that was done at Zoe, where I'm the US medical director, where they showed that the triglyceride rise takes about 6 hours after the meal to peak. And then it starts to come down. But the important point was that actually that was associated with inflammation. So the measure of a person's triglycerides, not fasting, but after a meal, was associated with inflammation. By the way, you want to know what else drives your triglycerides up hard? Alcohol. So you have this meal, and what I'm saying to you is for at least the next 6 hours, your gut is going into an inflammatory state, right? And then it's going to take some time after that peak, 6 to 8 hours, it's going to start to get back on track. If you have another meal during that time, you just leveled it up, right? But if you were to take a break and you're like, okay, I'm going to take like 12 hours, okay? It starts to dial down around 8 or 10 hours, and then you're giving your gut a little bit of time to actually enter into repair mode. So it can kind of settle itself, get reorganized, right? So this is where the idea of fasting, time-restricted eating, can be beneficial. We know that within the gut microbiome, about 12 hours is when you start to see the benefits. And when you get to I'm an advocate for doing this overnight. So when you get to 14 hours, we actually had a study that we did at Zoe with 40,000 people who were doing a 14-hour fast. And basically what they told us is they felt better, they had more energy, they were less hungry. First 2 days, they were actually more hungry. And then that actually faded. They were less hungry and they had less bloating because I think their gut is healing.
Yeah, we should also mention, and we talked about this when we've spoken about it in other episodes. Fasting is not for everyone.
No.
If you have, if you have anorexic or restrictive or bulimic tendencies, obviously, if you have any disordered eating, that can be a real kind of contraindication.
100%.
And in addition, if you have an autoimmune condition, you have different needs. If you're in adrenal kind of burnout, if you're having adrenal problems in particular, this can actually be very not helpful and can actually feel very different. So just wanted to give that also a quick mention.
So I think and I think to that, it's part of this is being aware of what are the scenarios where you wouldn't want to do this, and also being intuitive about your process, right? So like, how do you feel? I think that like this is an important question for people.
I believed in the science of spirituality. I believed in the aspects of feeling a connection to something greater than ourselves. What I wasn't expecting is how I am not showing up consistently, where I'm like, oh, I'll eat this lunch at this time and I'll eat dinner here and I'm in this podcast, and to think about almost us as toddlers. Like if you have a toddler and you've ever hung out with a toddler, if lunch isn't at the same time every day, they are not pleased.
100%. Yeah. Well, and just think about like how much daylight savings time wrecks us, right? How 1 hour shifts can like impact us in such a powerful way, even as adults. So yeah, I think it's important to realize that about half of our genes are being clicked on and off during the course of a 24-hour time frame, right, at specific time points. And then in terms of your microbiome, there are over 50% of your microbes that are rising and falling at specific times a day to basically serve the needs of your body, because they're that embedded into your physiology and they want you to be successful. So during the day, the microbes are designed basically for protein metabolism, because that's what we need, because we're physically active. We're moving around, we're doing stuff, right? So we need basically microbes to help us ensure adequate stores of protein. But at night, they flip into rest and recovery mode, and they help us to repair and restore our gut barrier overnight. And it turns out that our immune system is nocturnal. And I can prove it because there are a bajillion people listening to me at home right now who will realize, like, you get congested at night. You get that cough at night. You get more sore at night. You had that big workout. You weren't sore when you went to bed, but you woke up sore, right? These are all manifestations of an active immune system while you're sleeping. And the reason why you want your immune system active at night is because actually it's preparing, it's serving you, it's doing its job. But what you don't want is your immune system active inappropriately during the day, because that makes you tired, it makes you fatigued, it zaps your energy.
We got to touch a little bit on some of the circadian rhythm stuff, but that's a really, really fantastic chapter, the rhythm of time. And it's something that we've been talking about with sleep hygiene. But I love how you kind of connect everything in terms of sort of how we're designed to be planned throughout the day. So people will just have to buy the book to get more on that. Thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful to consider you a friend of ours and a friend of the podcast. Tell people where they can find out all about you and more about the book as well.
Sure. So the book is called Plant Powered Plus. It's available everywhere that books are sold. I, of course, am a huge advocate for buying from your local bookstore, because those tend to be, mom and pop shops that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm pretty sure on a Saturday with a cup of coffee, you'd like to sort of browse. And if we only buy from our online purveyors, they're not going to be open for much longer. So we have to support them. And then if you want, my home base is theguthealthmd.com. And if you come to my website, you can sign up for my email newsletter. That's completely free. I have all kinds of offerings and things that I'm more than excited to share with you. Many of them are free. Some of them are not. I have courses. I have my clinic. I have my private community. So there's a lot for us to potentially do together. And I'm here to get people thriving. I want to improve your health. If you want to start with the book, it's a great place to start. And if you want to continue the conversation, I'm here for it.
Awesome. And pronounce your last name one more time for us.
Yes. Well, so we have Americanized this, Mayim.
Wow.
So we say Bulsiewicz. We read it like a word, Bulsiewicz. Uh-huh. But if we were to go to Eastern Europe, it rolls off the tongue and they say Bulsiewicz.
Thank you, Dr. B. Really, really appreciate you.
Thank you.
I know that episode might have seemed a little bit all over the place, but that's because Dr. B can speak to so many different aspects of health. He's not just a gastroenterologist. He's had to learn everything about nutrition, about epidemiology, about pharmaceuticals. Like, he knows so many different aspects of nutrition. It's really very exciting also to have him talking about mental health, about stress, about the sympathetic nervous system, and about religion.
There really was so much more. Maybe we will pick some of the circadian rhythm stuff up over on Substack. check us out, Mayim Bialik's Breakdown on Substack. And, one of the reasons we started the Substack community was to connect like-minded people who wanted to feel and create a space on the internet that was curious, open-minded, and supportive. I'm really touched and saddened by the amount of loneliness there is in this world, and our Substack community, while it is digital, is an attempt to make us feel a little bit more connected to one another. So if you're inspired by any of these episodes, come check it out.
And from our breakdown to the one we hope you never have, we'll see you next time.
It's Mayim Bialik's Breakdown. She's gonna break it down for you. She's got a neuroscience PhD or two. One fiction, and now she's gonna break down. It's a breakdown. She's gonna break it down.